So it's a bit of a paradox speaking after the tea break because tea break के पहले तो लोग सोते हैं, tea break के बाद भी सो सकते हैं. So I'll try to keep you awake. Can't promise. So we have all these questions to address. So जैसा मैंने बोला, I'm sure you guys would have some knowledge about conflict of interest. At what levels can conflict arise when you are in the medical profession? So we'll discuss the first two issues. So anybody would like to tell me what is conflict of interest? What is your perception? Anybody? Yeah. Madam told me you have discussed. Can randomly choose somebody. Disadvantage of sitting in the first row.
And if benefit in terms of monetary or any academic benefit.
Yeah, direct or indirect benefit. Yeah, correct. Yeah. So when an individual has a clash between personal interest, self-serving interest, and your duties or responsibilities, and remember that even if you appear to be at risk of bias, that could be perceived as a conflict of interest. Importantly, having an interest does not perhaps necessarily mean you have a conflict, and having a conflict does not necessarily mean you have done anything wrong. Provided, I think, as the previous speaker also very clearly said, it is not necessarily a problem if the conflict is managed properly or adequate or full disclosure is done, right? So the purpose, I'm glad that Madam and Dr. Vanita and Dr. Mohan are running these courses because in our time, they were never part of the medical curriculum. So you are fortunate that these things are being discussed because tomorrow you will perhaps be, sort of leaders in your own place or leading medical institutions or publishing. So these things are important. So industry physician interactions can cause conflict of interest because industry and doctors, they have a unique relationship. The industry will manufacture products which they cannot sell to the consumer or the patient directly. And we as doctors usually treat the patient with drugs and devices which are manufactured by the industry. And hopefully we have one common name, which is patient benefit. And this is a two-way benefit, doctor-physician relationship. So how will industry benefit from any relationship with us? Check shirt, yeah.
Basically, you're writing a particular drug, then they'll like to go to the pharmacist only. And if there are multiple studies regarding the drug, and systems saying that this drug is particularly a drug, then the sales of that drug will be more as compared to the other drugs.
So in a way, what you're saying is right, that industry will cultivate relationships with us because any access or any influence or any gratitude to and from the doctors is considered a good investment. It is like a business proposition for them. Good relationships with doctors will translate into more use of products. So that is a truth. And for them, it is a business proposition. How would it benefit us having a relationship with the industry? Last row, yeah. Yeah. Last row, green judge, green shirt, yeah. Thanks. Anybody wants to add? I totally agree with you. Sandeepan? Yeah, that's a modified conflict of interest. Good. I'm just joking. So you're right, collaboration with industry will help us translate research and innovations, as you rightly said, into clinical therapy. Interventional branches, minimally invasive branches. We have seen over the years that, I'll talk about cardiology, say stents, devices, for instance, invasive endoscopic procedures. All these are possible with collaboration with the industry. It also gives us training opportunities in these evolving fields. So it's a mutual two-way benefit. But as the previous speaker also said, the goals and the guiding principles will vary. The industry goal is business and our goal is patient benefit. So sometimes they are mutually beneficial. These relationships we know begin in medical school, residency training, persist throughout our lives. Sometimes the lines can get blurred and relationships that could be ethical or should be ethical can deteriorate into potential conflict of interest. So I'll just delve into a bit of history to keep you interested, hopefully. Anybody heard of this? I'll give you a clue. अब किसकी फोटो है? William Osler. So this is one of the most famous essays written by William Osler in late 1880s when he moved from the Pennsylvania School of Medicine to Johns Hopkins. And actually, you'll be surprised, nearly 130 years ago, he said that physicians may come to rely on seductive pamphlets or medical literature and salesmen who can express the most emphatic opinions on questions about which the greatest master of art are doubtful. So, it's a beautifully written monogram. And 130 years ago, he realized that this could become a potential conflict of interest. And 40 years ago in NEJM, this article was published that collaborative settings between industry and doctors can lead to emergence of conflicts, which is called the medical industrial complex, right? And again, a great study in NEJM, a national survey of doctor-industry relationship about potential conflicts of interest. 90% doctors said that they had some type of relationship. So having a relationship is not bad. We'll discuss what could be bad in the form of getting drug samples, gifts, reimbursement for professional meetings, consultancy, lecture fees, etc. And interestingly, people in solo or group practices or in commercial ventures were more likely to be involved with the industry than hospital-based or public-based enterprises, right? So this is published data. At what levels can conflict of interest arise? So, my questions would be, is it right to get a drug sample from a rep? Is it right to accept gifts, hospitality, sponsorship, attend sponsored educational meetings? Is educational funding of research by industry a good idea? And are you aware of any guidelines and regulations which deal with these conflicts of interest? So these are the theoretical questions which come to anybody's mind. Interestingly, again, Harvard Medical School, which is considered the yardstick of measure of any ethics, as early as 2009, it was given a F grade in terms of managing conflicts as far as medical representatives or other things are concerned. So they pulled up their socks, and today they are rated one of the best. So at what levels can conflict arise? I'll just ask. Oh, red shirt, the girl in the red thing, yeah. So somehow you always know कि तुम्हें पूछ रहे हैं, but you look left and right कि hopefully मुझसे. Sorry. So
the first point is that they ask us that our drug is better than other companies.
Yeah, good.
That point is that the
conflict can come. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Good. And you saved her actually. I was asking her. So, anything else? तुमसे पूछ रहा हूँ. I'm asking you. Yeah. Anything else? He is right. Anything else you think could be putting you into a situation of conflict of interest when you interact with the industry? Good. Yeah. So in my opinion, 5 or 6 things. Medical rep visits, as you rightly said, CMEs, you said, sponsored fellowships, journals, publishing journals, again, brief word will be, I'll just be brief about it. Conducting trials, because tomorrow you could be in places where you would be doing trials, and as part of professional organization when you write practice guidelines. So we'll just discuss these 5, 6 things quickly. First, these 3. Industry invests heavily in medical representatives visiting you because, as we have concluded, information which the reps give you translates possibly into increased business for them, right? So this is again published. Medical reps आपके पास आते हैं, what is their approach? What do they tell you? Second row. Check shirt. No N95 on the chin. So अब तुम बच नहीं सकते. Person behind you. अच्छा. संदीपन नहीं किससे पूछ रहा है?
To write their company's drug.
Sorry?
To write their company's
Correct. One is to write. तो तुमने एक हफ्ता नहीं लिखी, he comes back again. What does it tell you now? It's a four-pronged approach. So, first they, as you said, reason and objectify. Then they appeal to your professional pride. कि 10 लोगों ने KGMC में लिखी, आप भी लिखिए, आप SGPGI के हैं. Prescription from your pen carries a lot of power. They tell you, no? Offer gifts and freebies. That is the third thing. And last is the mercy appeal. I'll lose my job if you don't write. So these are the four things. So this is again published data. Medical students and interns, when they were asked about drug company interactions, young minds, nearly 3/4 said that company materials are not a bad way to learn things, but 4 in 5 also said that they know, they have the mindset to understand that the reps exaggerate benefits and downplay the risks. And about 3 in 5 said that even if you get gifts, it would not influence our practice because we are really sure of ourselves. We believe a lot in ourselves, not much in others, unfortunately. But interaction with reps can lead to a potential conflict of interest because information, as you also said rightly, given during these exchanges may not be ideal or ethical. They might overplay the benefits and downplay the risks. So this is again data from the BMJ. Interactions between doctors, senior doctors, junior doctors, all with the industry. Irrational prescribing can happen until and unless you have policies in place. So irrational or non-rational prescribing can happen if you just go by the medical reps interaction. Second conflict of interest, as somebody again pointed out, CMEs, because the truth is that in the last 2-3 decades, nearly 3 out of every 5 CME is being sponsored by industry. It has been happening in the West and now in India as well. So concerns of a potential bias in sponsored CMEs have cropped up. So I'll again ask you, does attending a sponsored CME affect prescription patterns? Again, you are shaking your head, you are the girl in the orange here. So you believe it's no. So, there is no yes or right in it. It depends on what you want to believe. Yeah, it does. Okay. So, no, yes, depends on the individual. So again, any answer could be right. So we'll discuss these because, the purpose of these lectures is not to drive home what I want to say. It is to, what you want to think about. So I'll just show you some data spread across the last 2 decades. A wonderful study. Effects of drug form enticements on prescribing patterns. So they polled anesthetists, IV drugs. Usage was tracked for about 2 years preceding and 1.5 years after a sponsored CME. And what they found was that alteration in prescribing pattern did happen, although the majority of the anesthetists believed that it would not happen. So it did happen to some extent. Again, a cardiologist perspective, because I have to give some cardiology example. Sponsored CME happening on a resort, which is the truth. Beta blockers and calcium channel blockers. Again, a subtle trend towards increasing that particular brand of drug. So it has to happen. Is a gift ever just a gift? A wonderful meta-analysis. So again, you should read all these articles because they're a bit of a history, but will give you a very good perspective. So company-sponsored CMEs, which highlighted the drug, which it will, and attending and accepting funding for these travels increase the prescription rates of that particular sponsor's medication. And in fact, it was also associated with requests by the doctors for adding that particular drug to the hospital inventory. So not only did it change the prescribing practice, it also swelled up your inventory according to where you were going. So non-rational prescribing is there. But again, so as I said, there are 2 sides of a coin. Another mindset or another thought is that no study has ever documented whether these prescription patterns lead to adverse outcomes. It happens, but again, somebody might want to say that if I am attending a certain CME, we'll understand how an ethical CME should be done. But if I am attending an ethical CME and I am getting knowledge of newer products, it might actually improve patient care. So, there are both sides of a coin. You should be aware of them. Third conflict, sponsored research and fellowships. In the West as well, 60% of all biomedical research is industry funded, because of late what is happening is, if you see the purple bar is the total spending in the West on research or fellowships. The purple, this one is the industry sponsorship, because as the government grants are going down, the industry is stepping more and more into biomedical research. Industry often funds fellowships in the West. So I'll show you some example. 2004, the American Association of Dermatology, which was in a fund crunch, said that we are using the industry for sponsoring new residency slots for 2006, and also expanding the initiative to solve shortages of nurse practitioners and other positions in their hospitals. The American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, again, early 2000, 1/3 of the budget was coming from the industry, including fellowships. St. Jude Medical, again, a huge cardiology device manufacturer, sponsored fellowships across US for residents. And in fact, in 2015, the American College of Cardiology started a diabetes collaborative registry, including fellowships, partnering with Boehringer. So, examples of industry-sponsored fellowships, and there was a huge media outcry, articles in the JAMA, industry's funding for residency sparks controversy, and Department of Justice investigation inquiry happened. And the bottom line was, they said that a company cannot enter academic arrangements purely for philanthropy. So it has to have some vested interest. And young doctors might get conditioned not only early in their careers to rely on company grants, but they might be induced to prescribe products preferentially. So it has to happen. And this takeover of the education, medical education by commercial interests was deemed to be sad and dangerous. So what happened? That association started saying no to industry funding, which again I'll come to later in my talk, that it actually led to a drop in sponsored residency fellowship programs. But some degree of industry permeation into medicine stopped. So apart from these three things which we discussed, a quick word about where other levels of conflict can come. Publishing, again, Dr. Piyush will discuss it, so I'll be very brief about it. How does industry support medical journals? Any thoughts on it? Anybody who's sleeping? No, none at the moment. Deepak? The one way to escape questions is keep looking at the screen, hoping nobody will see you. So how does industry support medical journals? Yeah, somebody said ads, absolutely. So sponsoring ads, sponsoring supplemental issues, publishing charges of entire issues, and providing online free subscription to members. So there are multiple ways, purchase of articles. So this is again an interesting paper, old papers, but that is where you will find them. Advertisements in leading medical journals, experts assessments. So they polled all prestigious journals, including NEJM, and found out the ads and the references which the ads had quoted and sent it to multiple experts in the specialty. And surprisingly, experts said that they disagreed with the ad that this was actually the drug of choice. In fact, 1/3 said that the ad should never have been published. It should have been revised. It misled the readers, and the ads would lead to improper prescribing. So journal ads should be taken with a pinch of salt. What the BMJ has done about it, we'll come to when we discuss what steps to solve these conflicts of interest. Supplemental issues, again, there's a huge debate about it. Published data, articles published in journal supplements compared to those published in the parent journal. So sometimes when these are sponsored supplements, American Journal of Cardiology, American Journal of Medicine, American Heart Journal, the trials or the data published in supplements were generally inferior in quality to papers published in the main issues. So when they are sponsored supplements, they are likely to be of less scientific quality. Another conflict of interest which can occur is conducting trials. So when you go out or you are into more senior positions, you might be involved in trials. Any idea what of seeding and switching trials? Last guy, yeah, तुम जो थोड़ा LAO में बैठे थे, अब हाँ. Yeah. What are seeding trials? Any idea? Switching trials, anybody? So what is seed? Na? You are planting a seed. So seeding trials are company conduct trials simply to get doctors to prescribe their drug. So these are seeding trials. Switching trials, patients are switched from the usual treatment to the new treatment. So if you are part of such trials and you are unsure about it, remember that often they are sponsored trials. Scientifically, they are of low content until and unless they are backed by data, and they are rarely published, used for drug promotion. So this is one thing which you should perhaps most of the time stay away from. And financing of drug trials by companies and its consequences. Again, published data to show that usually industry sponsored research would be reported favorable, because most of the time either it is multiple publications of the same data, selectively publishing the data, or actually concealing data. I'll show you examples. Major trials and use of ghostwriters, who are actually industry guys who are writing for the journal. So it happens. I'll just show you Proficoxib and Vytorin story. So I'm sure madam knows something about it. So this is a Vytorin study published in NEJM. Upper GI toxicity of Proficoxib and naproxen in patients with rheumatoid arthritis. And you see both the drugs were given in patients with rheumatoid, and they found that Proficoxib had lesser GI effects, which was expected. Incidence of MI is lower among patients in naproxen. So it's a very clearly worded statement. Actually, it was higher, 3 to 4 times higher in Proficoxib. And they worded that it was naproxen which was lower. So what happened is, this is 2000. Till 4 years, the drug continued to be used. And then a series of articles appeared, and the drug was actually withdrawn by the company in 2004. And when this article data was pooled, it found that there was an increased risk of MI observed in the 2000 data of Vigor, which was attributed to cardioprotection of naproxen. You see the way the things are switched. And our findings indicate that this drug should have been withdrawn several years earlier. And in fact, when they withdrew it 4 years down the line, till then 80 million people had used the drug, and the sale has reached about $2.5 billion. So this is amazing. And the company was actually sued both in US and Australia, and was indicted for misleading practices, and they settled for huge claims. So this is one drug, closer home to cardiology. Enhanced investigators again published in NEJM. Simvastatin, which is an anti-lipid drug, with or without ezetimibe, again an anti-lipid drug. So 2 years, they found that the primary outcome measure, which is again measuring carotid intimal medial thickness by imaging, they found that combined therapy with ezetimibe and simvastatin was as good as simvastatin alone. So both drugs are same. And you will be surprised to know that the combination in US was costing $100 a month, and the monotherapy alone was $6 a month. So monotherapy was as good as combination. Despite that, 2 days later, the American College of Cardiology released a statement. This trial is not a clinical outcome study, so major decisions should not be taken based on this. Patients should not stop taking the prescribed medications. So they should have said that mono is as good as combination, but they did not say so. And further research is needed to decide which therapy should be preferred. And amazingly, similar sentiments from the European Society of Cardiology. And the entire lid was blown off 2 weeks later by the New York Times, which said that the parent company, Merck, had the results of the trial 2 years before releasing them. So they sat on it. And this led to a senatorial inquiry in 2008 against the company, in which they said 4 things. They actually delayed the publication of the trial results without informing the PI. In fact, they had a 49 plan of $3.5 billion, in which they induced the doctors to switch patients from Vytorin, from cheaper statins to Vytorin. Nearly $5 million had been paid to the American College of Cardiology, both in terms of educational fees, satellite symposiums, etc. And the senator said that these payments to the ACC might have influenced their comments about Vytorin. So again, the point of showing this data is that this happens across all specialties. So So you should be careful about, and you should be again, reading too much into the literature and making your own opinions. Last conflict of professional organization, which I briefly touched upon. In the association have sometimes endorsed bewildering products just to get financial support. So this is in 2009, American Academy of Family Physicians proudly announced that Coca-Cola was their sponsor in educating patients about healthy eating and obesity. And when the reporter queried their MD, Doug Henley, he said that there's no problem. We have had relationships with Pepsi and McDonald's in the past as well. So, having two wrongs doesn't make the third one right. Does industry influence guidelines? Because the sacrosanct is guidelines. We harp on guidelines. So, does industry influence guidelines? I'll show you a quick example. Gabapentin, anti-psoriasis drug, and the nephrology guidelines. It's not as if cardiology alone is involved. So this is Germany. Gabapentin, they found that the MAH is the market authorization holder. That company had manipulated data so that the guidelines could be endorsed by the German society. They had actually the primary endpoints were changed, unfavorable data were not reported. Similarly, anti-psoriasis drug was judged more favorably in the German S3 guidelines. S3 guidelines are the highest priority guidelines, as opposed to the NICE guidelines, which had not judged the drug very favorably. And when they delved deep into it, they found that in the German guidelines, nearly 2/3 of the guys had financial links with the parent company, which was actually trying to get approval of the drug. While in NICE, none of the guideline writers had any conflict of interest. Nephrology guidelines, again, I said I'll show you an example. This is 2007. Surprisingly, they increased the target range of hemoglobin from 11 to 12 to 11 to 13, just 1 gram increase. And this was thought to increase the use of ESP, erythropoietin stimulating protein, because the target hemoglobin, if it's higher, you want to use ESP. And this was thought to increase the ESP sales. And actually, Amgen was which manufactures ESP, was one of the major sponsors of the KDQI guidelines. Subsequently, it was revised. So again, when we write practice guidelines, data shows that many of the guideline writers do not actually report conflict of interest. Nearly 1 in 6 would have multiple conflicts of interest. So this raises questions about the objectivity of these guidelines, the way they are developed. So we need to have some steps in place. And most doctors, when they were polled in the West, they said that institutions should have guidelines to avoid conflicts of interest. So again, happy that these classes are happening. Medical reps visit. First of all, policies should be there to regulate their site access by appointment only. Acceptance of any gifts, whether on-site or off-site, should be banned. Drug samples, I think that published data actually shows that if you take, somebody very nicely said that it should only be given to the needy. So samples, what in the West it is happening, they are left at the center pharmacies, where a committee actually decides how to use these samples. CME programs, remember there is no such thing as a free lunch. So laws have been put in place to have policies, how to manage financial support of these CMEs, so that the interactions of doctors are principled and participation in appropriate CMEs can happen, because to some extent, I believe that it could be knowledge sharing. So establish a central CME office where requests for all industry support comes in, have a central fund management system, have a central CME committee whose members are free of ties to the industry, and have control over the scientific content and speakers. And the industry should not control the academic content, avoid company presentations, and get audit mechanisms in place so that you are sure that you are complying with all these guidelines. So that is for CMEs. For fellowships, again, the thought process is that philanthropy from industry can continue if you are short of funds, but with a transparent process. Appropriate documentation in keeping with prevalent institutional guidelines if you have them. So it should not be under the table, as it happened in the previous talk as well. It has to be a transparent procedure in which the selection of recipients of such fund must be the sole responsibility of the program head or the program director or a central committee, should not be industry driven. Journals, again, as I said, this is again a beautiful paper to read, Uneasy Bedfellows, Medical Journals and Industry. So industry-sponsored reviews and supplements should always be under scrutiny, and each journal should have its own guidelines in place so as to how to stay away from industry penetration. And in this context, I said I'll mention about BMJ. BMJ USA, you'll be surprised to note that it has circulation of nearly 1 lakh a month, paid fully by advertising. But again, what they say is that the laws control the claim which is made in the advertisements. The editorial team does not review the claims made by the advertisements, but it encourages the readers to criticize the claims made in the advertisement and even encourages them to complain if a claim is found to be false. Trials, if you're part of them, mention industry funding. No academic participant should accept honoraria. Have unrestricted access to the trial data. So the data should be in the public domain so that if somebody wants to scrutinize it at some point of time, it is possible. And no company rep obviously should be sitting on the executive committee of the trials or should be driving the academic content of the trial. So what have societies done of late, including the American College and the American Heart Association? Formulated a conflict of interest statement for all members. Those with financial conflicts should be recused from the panel. Those with the conflict who cannot be divested should constitute a minority of the group which is writing the guidelines. And only members without a conflict of interest should write the final guidelines. Importantly, the guidelines should not present a recommendation as a fixed set of rules from which deviation is implied to be substandard or not of quality of care. There should be some room for variation depending on what your patient is. And very importantly, lastly, a minority report should always be given from dissenting positions, as happened in the American Society of Hypertension about 5 years ago when they had a minority report as well. So lastly, coming to legal sanctions. Government regulations are in place, and I think I'll touch briefly upon Sunshine Act, which all of you should know, which was passed in US in 2010, which mandates public disclosure of payments or transfers to doctors by medical company. In fact, the data is put up every 3 months on the Department of Health and Human Service website, wherein consultation, honoraria, grant, research, even gifts, food, travel, if you are taking, so it is in the public domain. And remember that the Sunshine Act does not prohibit collaboration. Financial ties with the industry do not necessarily mean wrongdoing, but it means that you have to disclose them whenever it is required. Exempts in Sunshine Act, educational materials which directly benefit the patients, loans of devices for trial period, and samples. NCI rules, again, you should be aware about. The practitioner should not receive gifts, travel facilities or hospitalities like vacations, etc., cash or monetary grants. Funding can be received through approved institutions by proper disclosure. So again, be aware of the NCI rules. Research proposal, provided they are cleared from the relevant ethical committees. Publicly disclose everything you want at the outset. It was mentioned in the previous talk as well. And freedom to publish the results by inserting these clauses right at the outset in your memorandum of understanding. You are allowed to work in advisory capacities, consultant, researchers, but again, provided your integrity and freedom are maintained and affiliations are within the law as per your institutions, they are disclosed and transparent. These are NCI rules. And you should maintain all degrees of professional autonomy. So lastly, too many restrictions can ultimately hurt our patients. So again, other side of the coin. It happened in the USA when the Sunshine Act was passed. Conferences and CMEs, especially in Massachusetts, where the law was first launched, they markedly dropped down. Grants for trials, PG programs were also curtailed. And what happened was that people started worrying that future innovations and developments would be curtailed because sponsorship would not be there. And in fact, Newsweek had this poll among the public in 2010, where most of the public supported the collaboration of doctors and industry for innovation and research in the times to come, and said that inappropriately tight restrictions might reduce innovations. So how to go about it? Medicine, I think, is a very technology intensive branch, and collaboration is necessary for research, education, and perhaps quality improvement. Although industry does give this support, it also provides incentives that can potentially influence our choices and lead to conflicts. So medical curriculum, first of all, should incorporate these workshops or these lectures more often. You need to have institutional policies in place so that everybody is under their umbrella. At the level of the regulatory bodies, while the guidelines urge the doctors to stick to principles, there does not seem to be any directive to the drug industry. So that is important. Not many are aware of these MCI rules. So it is the duty of everybody to propagate or to spread these rules, spread the knowledge about these rules. So it is not the prerogative of the industry to make you aware of these rules, because they'll come with you, come to you and say, "Ye sign kar dijiye, wo kar dijiye." Be very careful of what you sign. More visibility of these MCI rules should be there on websites or the internet. I mentioned about John Hopkins. They got an F in 2009. So then they pulled up their socks. Drug samples are not acceptable until unless they're for patient education use or they have a central depository where the samples are deposited. No gifts except educational items. They are permitted there. Books, posters, academic grants. Site access, as I mentioned, by reps is regulated, properly credentialed, marked in calendars, and by appointment only. At a personal level, again, disclose all conflicts whenever you are asked for. Take permission for honorary consulting fees if it's possible. And if you are taking, you might have the personal choice of transferring to a parent society or philanthropic charity, which many people do. Difficult to set a monetary value that would render a gift unacceptable. You might want to ask, "Kya gift le sakte hain?" That's a very greedy question to ask. So, in my view, whenever you're confronted with such ethical dilemma, ask, what is the purpose of the industry offer? What do my colleagues think about this? What will my patients and public think about this arrangement? And after talking to Dr. Amita, I've added a fourth thing yesterday. What would my family think of me? So, these are four important things. So remember, your reputation is driven by what people feel about you and what your peers, what your colleagues think about you. Healthy relationships, I believe, can exist between the doctors and industry. We just need to be absolutely crystal clear as to what that relationship is going to be. It's a relationship of trust between the doctors. So we don't have to erode that trust. Answer is not a collective industry hug. I'm not saying go out and hug the industry rep in the next OPD. But we must not become so tied to the support that we cannot function with that support, without that support. So transparency is the key. Focus should be on transparency and ethically managing these relationships without a potential conflict of interest. And I think this might help than potential threats of legal sanction. Thank you.